PalWorld has taken the world by storm, and it's quite easy to see why. It's like an adult version of Pokemon that we all dreamed of. So today we're gonna be taking a look at PalWorld on the best machine I could build. So we've got an i9 14900K and an RTX 4090. We're gonna be testing a few different resolutions and see how it performs in its early access stage. So just out of curiosity, I'm gonna start the game with 1080p, very low settings. I know that the RTX 4090 is probably an overkill for those settings, and we will be hitting CPU bottlenecks, but let's see how that handles it. Let's just apply the settings, and we are at night, so I might just go and sleep real quick. So yeah, you can definitely see we're not using much of the GPU. We hovering around 50%, and it's a very heavy CPU bottleneck, around 200 to 230 FPS. The game kind of looks terrible as well and very low, like none of the shadows are present. But it runs super smooth, as you can see, it doesn't really dip much under 200. What I'd like to do is go have a little flight and see if we can maybe get a little bit low FPS. We fly up a little bit. You can see it kind of dipped to like 170s a little bit. The 1% lows in this game are not that great. But all in all, honestly, the performance is not as bad as some of the other preview games that are out there. It's doing pretty well for, you know, its early stages. You can see a lot of popping, which is obviously to be expected at very low settings. So honestly, the averages are sort of about 220. Again, as to be expected. It's a super heavy CPU bottleneck, so we're gonna go ahead and just put the settings up to ultra and see if we're still hitting the CPU bottleneck. Okay, so you can see we put in all the settings up to epic right here with 1080p still, just to see if we hit the same CPU bottleneck. I'm just going to apply the settings. I mean, straight off the bat, the game looks so much better with all the shadows and all the detail. But yeah, as I expected, we're still hitting roughly the same CPU bottleneck. Not as much, or almost. We almost maxed out the GPU in some areas. Here you can see it's reaching sort of 94. By dropping back to the 70s straight away, but the FPS is practically the same, maybe a little bit lower if we look in certain directions, but for the most part it's solid 220. So again, a CPU bottleneck, as to, you know, as I expected, as to be expected at that resolution with a 4090. So let's see if we can maybe get into some combat here. So you can see we're able to drop a little bit more. It's still a CPU bottleneck, but we drop it into sort of 160s and 170s range with a little bit more going on screen. It's not super demanding again, you know, it's just a few pals here and there fighting, so it's not too bad. I'm sure you can drop a little bit more if I wanted to, but it's still a super heavy CPU bottleneck. So we're gonna move on to 1440p next. Okay, so up next we have 1440p. I'm leaving it on epic settings just to see how well it performs. I'm expecting it to be roughly on par with 1080p. I mean, the FPS is a little bit lower. It's roughly the same CPU bottleneck, it's just a little bit more intensive. So we have sort of 170s on the ground. If I fly up into the air a little bit more, as the LOD kicks in, you can see the FPS spike a little bit, almost hitting the 200 FPS mark. So it's a slightly more demanding experience, but the GPU is still not being fully utilized. I mean, you can see it's hitting 99 in some areas where when I look towards the mountain, you can actually see at this point the GPU becomes a bottleneck a little bit more there. And I feel like that'd be the same story when we hit 4K. For the most part, it's going to be a GPU bottleneck from now on. But I'm curious to see what kind of performance we get when we start 4K with low settings instead of epic. So let's try that next. Okay, so this is 4K at very low settings. I'm gonna fly around on the ground a little bit here. You can see it's hovering around 97 to 99. So it's mostly GPU bottleneck at this point. So this is native 4K, no upscaling, no DLSS. The version I'm running is the Xbox Game Pass version on PC, so it doesn't actually support DLSS as of right now. But we are still around 200 FPS when we're looking into the distance with sort of lower LODs. It's not the exact same 220 we were getting with 1080p, But at least now we're mostly fully utilizing the GPU. I'm just gonna see if I can get maybe into some combat on the ground and see how low we can drop this. So you can see in combat we get in sort of 140s to 160s. It drops kind of the same in 4040p. I don't think it's a huge difference. And you can see the CPU becomes a problem at that point, since there's more going on screen. The dips are more because of the CPU. You can see the GPU is actually bringing up a lot of resources here because it doesn't actually have to render as much in the distance. So you can kind of see we drop into lower 160s in some instances here, and then it shoots up back to almost 200 when the battlefield frees up a little bit. As to be expected, to be honest. Again, we're not rendering much of the shadows or the reflections or anything like that. So next we're going to try and put in the settings to epic, keeping it at 4K, and see if we can finally hit a consistent GPU bottleneck. Okay, so last but not least, we're going to be testing the game at 4K with epic settings, which is basically the way I've been playing the game for the past few days. We do have the Xbox version, like I mentioned, so there is no DLSS. We've got the frame rate limit uncapped, and yeah, let's have a look. Immediately, you can see a huge difference, all the shadows coming in, all the details, the god rays. It's actually a pretty game. I mean, it's a UE5 title. So it does have all the bells and whistles you expect from a modern game. Obviously this is a pre-alpha version, so or beta, whatever they want to call it. It is an early access game, so there's still a lot more work to be done, but it is a pretty game to look at. And the good news is that we actually are finally hitting a consistent GPU bottleneck, and we're hovering around 120s. From my experience, the lowest I've seen it drop these settings is probably about like 90, like low 90s. In sort of heavy combat scenarios, you can see we've got a lot of PALs on the screen right now. We're gonna actually fly around a little bit just to see if we can drop a little bit more, if we can maybe hit much higher FPS. I'm assuming once we go up into the sky, it's gonna go up a little bit. It's gonna sort of free up the GPU resources a little bit. We're in 120 so right now, but yeah, the game looks way better like this. So I've been flying for a little bit right now, trying to go into slightly more demanding areas, into the forest, into areas with more pals, and honestly it's quite solid. It hovers between sort of 105 to like 120. I can't get it to drop too much. What I'm going to do now is try and sort of maybe start a fight with some of the pals and see if it drops a little bit more. I'm expecting it to go to sort of lower 90s, but yeah, let's see how that does. So we've been fighting the innocent pals for a little while. We've murdered actually quite a few of them, but the only way to get it to drop under 100 is to run into the woods. And if there's enough trees in close proximity on my screen, it drops just under 100. There you go, we got like 97 over there. And I mean, I do understand that this is a very expensive GPU to be playing on. But it doesn't seem as bad as some of the other games in recent history. If I compare it to what Hogwarts Legacy was like on day one, this is night and day. Granted, there's a lot less detail in vegetation and terrain. You know, Hogwarts was quite a Hogwarts Castle was a difficult thing to render, but still, you know, I think it's quite impressive. The state this game is in right now in such early access. I've seen if you play the Xbox version, it kind of drops, you know, under 30. But I believe it's because of the fact that it's not dynamic resolution. Xbox version, actually all of the Xbox version use fixed resolution. So I think that's their downfall. And obviously if you're playing on an Xbox One from 2013, then I wouldn't expect much of it anyway. So it's probably time to upgrade to at least a Series S, which I believe is a consistent 60 FPS experience. You know, granted, it's rendered at 720p. So, yeah, in my opinion, PalWorld, you know, great potential there. Obviously, it's a super fun game with, I think it's like, what, 8 million people playing it or have played it. You know, that's just on Steam as well, so not even including the Xbox version. But I can't wait to see, you know, how much further they take it. It's already a very pretty game to look at, and I'm excited to see, you know, what they're going to come up with in the months to come. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you on the next one.